I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 110. Today in the show, we're joined by David Draper, a freelance outdoor writer and wild game cooking expert, to discuss open country whitetail hunting and our favorite food, venison.
All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today, we're joined by freelance writer, avid hunter, and serious wild game aficionado, David Draper. You've likely seen him in the pages of Field and Stream and a number of other media outlets. And today, David is going to be chatting with us about his experiences deer hunting in his home state of Nebraska and some of the other Great Plains states. We're going to talk about how to have success in that part of the country, and we're also going to talk a bit about venison and cooking wild game. So, Dan, you're back in the fold. What do you think about this plan?
I'm back. I'm all good, man. I love talking about food. Okay, check. I love talking about hunting, especially when there's a possibility me and you could go to Nebraska to hunt where this guy lives.
Yes.
So it's kind of beneficial for us. We might have to ask some questions that are purely beneficial to only us.
I love those podcasts where it's just so you and me can get new tips. We need as much help as we can get, so we gotta ask for it when we can. So
Exactly.
So leading into this, I guess, Nebraska, right?
Nebraska.
David's from Nebraska. You hunted Nebraska 2 years ago. If you could sum up what you enjoyed about hunting Nebraska in like one sentence or a couple sentences, how would you do that?
Ooh.
Did you enjoy it?
Absolutely beautiful. I mean, the landscape goes on forever. The sunrises and sunsets were spectacular. And, while the game was there too, I missed an antelope, saw, the number of whitetail there are low compared to the mule deers. So I saw quite a few mule deer. I saw a handful of whitetails, and a couple of the bucks were really quality bucks. But set the wild game aside, it's just I was in the Sandhills region, and you can get to the highest point relatively easy of an area and see forever.
There's something about the plains that they don't get as much hype as other ecosystems like the mountains or on the ocean or whatever it might be, but something about being out there in this undulating plains, these hills of grass swaying in the wind, like I love that. And when we're driving, this past few weeks or a month or two ago, when I drove out here, we went through North Dakota and eastern Montana, and every hill you go over, like you said, you can see so far. And
Right.
The thing that always happens to me is whenever I'm in a place like that, I just can't help but sit there and think, what must this have looked like 200 years ago when Lewis and Clark came over here and there was a herd of literally 1 million buffalo over this next hill? Like, what must that have been like?
Yeah. It's nostalgic in a way.
Oh, yeah. I oftentimes when I'm in places like that, I just sit there and wish that I was born 200 years earlier to see that,
Right.
to be out there. Man, it's a pretty special place.
Right. All we got to do is wait for the DeLorean to come out, like the real version of it, and we can hop back 200 years to check it out.
Would you do that, or would you be worried about the butterfly effect?
I'd be worried about the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
I would definitely be worried about the butterfly effect.
That's a real thing. You make what's the thing? If the butterfly flap swings on one side of the world, it might affect the other side or something like that, right?
Right. There's actually, this is going to go nowhere, but there's actually a movie or a book. It's a science fiction novel. I started reading it, didn't finish it, about a guy who goes back in time to, I think it was to take a look at dinosaurs. But then when he came back, all he did was step out of his time capsule or spaceship or whatever it was that he was in, and put one footprint on the ground. And he came back and it was completely different. Like the sky wasn't blue. The air had a different smell to it. The people looked different. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. There was a movie about that too. Not that specific story, but I think it was called The Butterfly Effect with, I think, Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, one of the greatest actors of our generation.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, here we are, as usual, talking about something very much not related to what we're supposed to be talking about. But really, it would be interesting to go back there, as long as we wouldn't change the course of humankind.
Yeah, let's be serious a second. It would be really cool to time travel.
It would be cool. Slightly freaky, but very cool.
Just imagine this. If you could time travel, would you go? I would go back to the exact days that, obviously you can't run into yourself, but go back to the exact days that your trail camera may have had that giant buck in front of it, or go to a period where you missed a deer and you just kind of, give yourself a mulligan, so to speak.
Well, so take this. Okay. If you could rewind time back to the day of your shipwreck encounter and you could change it and do it over again, would you, or would you rather live the life that you did having learned from that experience?
I don't think I could, because if I killed that deer, I would probably be some kind of famous hunting celebrity, and I'd have to deal, like Notorious Big said, more money, more problems. I'd probably be.
Yeah, that's you. You're right.
That would happen. No, I wouldn't want to go back in time. You?
Well, to any encounter of mine or anything like that.
No, the Jawbreaker.
Yeah, I'd like to say I would have liked to right that wrong, but to your point, I think things happen for a reason somehow, right. And I probably learned something from that experience, and I suppose, you can't go back in time, so you just got to move forward.
Right.
But it sure would be nice to be able to change a few things that if you knew it wasn't going to impact anything else, if you could just right that little wrong, fix that little thing, sure would have been nice in the short term, that's for sure.
Right. Or at least go back a day or two after you find out the winning numbers of a giant lottery, and then you can win a ton of money, and then you can buy a ton of land for come back to the present. You're only going back maybe a day or two. Nothing really changes. And then you win that lottery. And then guess what?
What?
You can hunt anytime, anywhere.
That would be nice. Do you ever play that game with yourself where you imagine, you look at the lottery that day or whatever it is and you say, okay, what would I do with $240 million or something like that? Do you ever sit there and torture yourself with that idea?
I play the game, what would I do with an extra $500?
Yeah, I guess I'm right there too. Well, I
tell you what, it's been a while.
It has. We're allowed a little bit of digression, right?
Right. Now we can get professional again.
Yes. So we're talking to David. We're going to give him a call in a minute. We're going to talk about the Great Plains. We're going to talk about deer hunting. We're going to talk about some venison advice, hopefully, which, we've had Hank Shaw on in the past. He gave us some great advice. But if I were to go and talk to your wife right now, and if I were to say, take Dan's venison cooking now, versus 1 year ago, would she say you're any better? Have you learned anything, or are you still as you were last year?
Well, she could not answer that question because my wife is not a fan of deer meat unless it's mixed with like sloppy Joe sauce or something like that. You know what I mean? Like she's one of those people.
Oh, Dan.
It's embarrassing. I have to go out in public with her, and people are like, hey, remember, in these conversations at trade shows or around other hunting buddies, like, yeah, my wife cooks one hell of a beef, a venison stew or something like that, and I'm like, yeah, mine too, but she doesn't. So
this is a good reminder for me never to tell you about what we eat then in my household.
Right, all venison.
Yes, all venison. We actually have venison defrosting right now, and I think we're gonna have some tasty venison pasta tonight.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. So what do you do then? Do you just have to make like your own venison meal, and then your wife eats something different, or how do you handle that?
So there's days when I call it first supper, and that's when I cook my own venison, and then I just eat it. Then I have a second supper of what she cooks. So
that's awesome.
It's like a full course. It's like a meat appetizer, basically.
Dude, that is the best idea I've heard in a long time. I need to start having meat appetizers. It also made me think of I'm such a nerd that I can quote Lord of the Rings, but I'm going to. There's a part where the hobbits are walking down the trail and they're talking about being hungry, and someone's like, we already had breakfast. And then the guy's like, what about second breakfast? 11sies, and lunchtime, supper, dinner, afternoon snack. And
nerd alert.
Yeah. And with that, we should probably wrap it up.
I can't believe this is as successful of a podcast as it actually is, because there's times where even I go back to listen to it and I'm just like, oh boy, who puts up with this?
It really is remarkable. I thank you everyone for somehow dealing with this week in and week out. Like you said, it's kind of crazy. And I'll offer one more disclaimer that I just was reminded of just now. If totally off topic, but that's what we do. If for some reason the audio on my side sounds a little weird, Dan, I don't know if you can tell or not, but it's kind of echoey over here. It's because I'm recording today and our next episode in the basement of Sitka Gear's world headquarters.
Ooh, name drop. I'm recording in the corporate headquarters of Nine Fingers Studios. So,
well, that sounds pretty fancy too.
Yeah, it is.
I wish I had a better reason for why I'm doing it, but it's because everywhere I go has horrible internet. Like the house we have here in Montana, we are now in Bozeman, Montana for the rest of the month. The internet there is horrible. I tried to rent office spaces in different places in town. I can't find anything that'll let me in. So I had to like beg, borrow, and steal my way into Sitka to use their basement. So it works, and it's got high-speed internet. So I'm a happy man.
Jackpot.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate their generosity with their space. And I suppose before we get David on the line, we should take a quick break for a word from Sitka Gear, the sponsor of this podcast and now the home of the temporary recording studio. So let's do that real fast, and then we'll give David a call.
So as we do every week, we've got a Sitka story, but today's story is a little different, as it's just a preview of a larger Sitka story that comes from myself, actually, and Randy Newberg. Now, as many of you know, Randy Newberg is an avid user of Sitka Gear products, and he's the host of the Fresh Tracks TV show on Sportsman Channel and the host of the Hunt Talk Radio podcast. And last week, I actually got to be a guest on that podcast. So today, I wanted to share with you just a little snippet of that conversation, which is just jam-packed with so many interesting stories that took place while using Sitka Gear. And then I'd encourage you, after listening to this episode, to check out my full conversation with Randy. So here we are, talking about the allure of one of my more recent addictions, elk hunting.
I mean, I've never hunted whitetails where I've smelled that rank kind of, whew, boy. And a lot of times I'll turn to my camera guy and I'll tap my nose. I'm like, you smell that? And they nod their head.
Awesome.
And you know, all of a sudden.
That. I'm getting like tingly right now thinking about that.
And I think that's another part of the allure of elk hunting is it is so many of your senses. Mm-hmm. It is not just visual.
Yeah.
It's everything.
It truly is everything. Now, on my own elk hunting trips while enjoying that stench of elk, I've come to love the Sitka 90% pants and jacket. It's my go-to system for those hunts. So if you'd like to learn more about Sitka gear, visit sitkagear.com. And you can listen to that entire conversation with Randy at the Hunt Talk Radio podcast on iTunes or anywhere else that you like to find your podcasts. So now, let's get back to this podcast and our interview with David Draper. All right, with us now on the line is David Draper. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm excited. I'm a big fan of Wired to Hunt, and I'm pleased that you asked me to join you.
Yeah, well, we're pleased that you agreed. Sometimes they say no.
Oh, really? I can't believe someone would say no.
Actually,
I can.
Yeah, Dan can. I'm actually surprised more people don't say no. I don't think I have gotten a no yet, but I have gotten some just crickets. They never respond. So
yeah. That passive aggressive no.
Exactly. So we'll deal with that as we do. But we're already off to a good start today. Before you got on, me and Dan were off topic laughing about all sorts of goofy things. So we're going to try to stay on topic and talk hunting like we're supposed to here on that show. And I guess with that being said, Dave, for those who aren't familiar with you or maybe haven't seen your work in print, could you just tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do in relation to the outdoor world?
Yeah, sure. So I live in western Nebraska near the headquarters of Cabela's, where I actually worked for 12 years. I was a corporate communications specialist there. A great company to work for. I had a great time. But the cubicle walls started getting a little close and decided to break out on my own and became a freelance writer 6.5 years ago. You'll probably see most of my work in Film Stream, where I write the Wild Chef blog, and I also contribute to the magazine. I write for Peterson's Hunting, and as a freelancer, I write for anybody that'll pay me is my line. So you'll see my stuff in most outdoor magazines covering all sorts of hunting topics, from just general hunting tips to how to cook wild game. So wild game's probably my specialty, but I hunt everything: big time waterfowl hunter, deer hunter, elk hunter, turkey hunter. So I try to cover all the topics that are out there.
That's awesome. Now, I gotta share with you that Dan over here is pretty jealous of you because he has a certain affinity for that part of the country, western Nebraska, right, Dan?
I do. I went out there 2 years ago and hunted in the sandhills north of Ogallala.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you're not very far from me. That's probably an hour and a half north of Ogallala, and I agree. The sandhills are one of my favorite places in the world, and I've traveled and hunted around the world, and it's hard to beat that neck of the woods.
So, have you hunted mule deer over there, or whitetails, or what are you hunting in that part of the country?
Yeah, I'm primarily, or I should say, I hunt lots of, but I love hunting mule deer, and that's kind of what we have in our neck of the woods. And I'm a family farmer, so that's kind of what we have where I live as well. Whitetails are kind of on the river bottoms around here, though we do get some open country whitetails too, which I enjoy hunting them as well. But mule deer mostly, but it's funny because where I live, it's really, it's half and half. There's both animals there, so it's, I kind of and the tags are usually good for a buck of either sex or either species, depending if you're not in a mule deer conservation area.
So what do you think which is the harder deer to hunt? And now, since you're in a spot that has both, mule deer or whitetail, which is the trickier one?
Wow, that's a tough question. I like to defend my mule deer because everyone thinks, mule deer, big bucks are dumb and they'll stop and look back and all these reasons. But I don't know. That's a tough question, Mark. I love hunting mule deer, but whitetails are smart, and man, are they tough to hunt. So I'm going to give the nod to whitetails, though it hurts me a little bit to do so.
Well, it made us feel better, so thank you.
No problem. But I really think, depending on where you're at, but open country whitetail is so much different than a whitetail where in your guys' neck of the woods, or you hunt them differently anyway. Whenever I have to go sit in a tree somewhere, it's a strange thing for me.
So tell us about open country whitetail hunting then, because that's not something I've done a whole lot of, although this year I'm going to. What does make it so different?
It depends on how you hunt them. And you can hunt them. You can obviously put a blind up or find the trees, though there aren't many of them in my neck of the woods to hunt. But really, it's a spot and stalk affair a lot of time, or an intercept affair, and just kind of figure out what they're keying on. Obviously, they're still really big on agricultural fields if they're in the area, and water sources, two very big things out here in open country. But but really it's just surprising where you find whitetails where you wouldn't think so. I mean, you can look like there's no cover for miles and miles around, and you step on a tall piece of grass and a big buck will come busting out of there. It's just a strange thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm slowly starting to figure that out. Like, as you know, I'm out here in Montana right now, and I'm starting to scout for a trip that I'm going to be taking in September to hunt here. And already I'm looking around, like, where am I going to hunt these deer? Like, there's nowhere I'm putting up a tree stand, that's for sure, in some of these spots at least. So how do you go about, when you're starting a hunt like that, how do you start that process in your scouting? I mean, are you just standing somewhere and watching for a while, or what's your kind of process?
Yeah, that's one of the benefits to open country hunting is that you can generally see deer, although they're sneakier than you think, and they use the contours of the land. But you have such open country to stand that a good pair of binoculars or a spotting scope and a night spin in behind the windshield of your truck is really the best way to go about it. Where I live, there's section roads, so about every mile there's a dirt road. So you just do a lot of driving and just look for them. And look in spots where there's some CRP cover, where there's tall grass, or an abandoned farmstead, or someplace where there's a little bit of cover. Obviously, whitetails are still very cover relevant, or they use cover a lot. So anywhere you can find some cover in that seemingly open country, you're probably going to find a deer. I mean, the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life on the hoof, I kicked up while I was hunting pheasants on a little tiny corner of CRP grass in the middle of nowhere in southeast Nebraska. Or south central Nebraska. It's really just surprising. I had a shotgun in my hand and I was walking a tiny spot of grass, hoping to kick up a rooster, and I kicked up a giant buck.
Wow. It is funny sometimes the stuff they choose to hole up in. It's surprising.
Yeah, and it's surprising that a deer can hide in that. I mean, that grass I was walking, I guess it was waist high, so a deer can lay down and disappear. But I almost stepped on him before he even got up, and I'm sure he knew I was there before then. But he just wanted to hold tight until I obviously had to kick him out of his bed practically.
Now, for some of these whitetails, when you are whitetail hunting, are you trying spot and stalks on the whitetails too, or is that just the muleys that you try stalking on?
If the cover's right or the terrain's right, if they're in some pretty broken country, I'll try it. I'm not successful very often, if at all. But for me, it becomes more of and even for mule deer, it becomes more of an intercept affair. If you can figure out their pattern, or if there's spots, like if there's some big open country and you see a deer, maybe in some tall grass bedded, and you see an abandoned farmstead, a far way away, they relate to those landmarks like a human would. And so if you can figure out where they're going to go, or if there's a water tank somewhere that you know of, you can get between them and hopefully they walk by. I mean, it's the same. It's a similar thing to sitting in the tree stand. It's just you don't have a tree to sit in. You have to get hunkered in the ground or put up a ground blind and hopefully get used to it in time.
Do you use any trail cameras, like say preseason or during the season, to try to maybe in a funnel or a pinch point to, I guess, look for deer that you want to shoot?
Yeah, definitely. If you hunt in the same land a lot, you kind of figure out the patterns. And like you said, there's pinch points, there's funnels, there's a tule or a draw, or even just a real low point that they'll use, irrigation ditch. You'll find some crossing points there. They're creatures of habit. They'll use the same crossing point. And yeah, trail cam is great for that. I also, when I start hunting pheasants in late October, I'll start seeing some rubs by then. And so I'll put a trail cam up. It could be a little short stretch of trees, and there'll be one tree in there that's trash. I'll try to put a trail cam up there just to see what's there. It might not be able to hunt it, but it's always good to know when there's deer in the area and what kind of deer they are.
Speaking of what quality of deer there are, I feel like a lot of the states near where you're at, like Iowa or Kansas, right? They get a lot of hype for their great big whitetails, but Nebraska's not too bad either, is it?
There's no deer in Nebraska, so move along, please.
I was afraid you'd say that.
That's my standard line when people ask me about deer hunting in Nebraska. But no, it's funny. Right now, today, I'm writing a story, Top 10 Whitetail States for Bow Hunting World magazine, and as much as it pains me to do it, I'm going to rank Nebraska pretty high. It is. I don't think it's a sleeper state anymore. People are figuring it out, and they know there's good whitetails here, but it can be a great state. I mean, it doesn't have the cachet of Iowa or Kansas or Missouri, but it can be a really good state. The problem with whitetail hunting in Nebraska is whitetail are primarily found on private land. There's not a lot of public land percentage-wise in Nebraska, and so it's definitely a pay-to-play deal getting on land, or if you're lucky enough to get on some land that you can knock on a door on. But it is tough. That's the hardest part in Nebraska.
So,
especially when it comes to whitetails.
yeah, so you kind of intrigued me there with this article you're working on. Can you share with us some of the other states that are in your top 10?
Yeah, I probably can, and it's that's such a hard thing. When the editor comments that I want you to write the top 10 whitetail states, that is a hard thing to do because who do you leave out and who do you put in?
Yeah.
So I'll give you a couple I put in that maybe you might not think, and maybe you will think. I put in Ohio. And Ohio has been a great state for whitetails, but it's obviously been on the downtrend in the past few years, but I think it has great potential. So it actually cracked the top 10. That's on there. Wisconsin, another one that's been tough lately, but I think I'm going to include it as well because it still has potential. I mean, they kill, 300-some thousand deer a year, so there's always potential for a good deer there. And then all of your major players, Kansas, Iowa, Kentucky's going to be in there. I think there's some southeast states that maybe get overlooked. Mississippi's a great state, but man, Georgia and Arkansas have some really good numbers as well if you look at the numbers hard. So, their age class of bucks in the southeast is creeping up there. And yeah, there are smaller body deer, but I think there's some great potential there. So that's kind of some I'm looking at. I'm still really narrowing it down. It's so hard when you write that list to write 10 and then say I'm done because there's always a great state that you're going to leave out.
Oh, yeah. I actually did an article like that for North American Whitetail like 3 years ago. And but it was the top 20. I think I did one was the top 20 DIY states, and then one was just like the top 20 trophy buck states or something like that. And to your point, it's really tough because a lot of that stuff's subjective, right? You're just kind of comparing apples to oranges, or when you do try to get into the details. I tried to pull all sorts of Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young rankings, and I looked at state data, and I looked at public land, and I looked at average lease rates, and all this different stuff. And you can just get so bogged down in it, and no matter what you do, someone's going to complain. I got all sorts of comments like, "You're an idiot. Why'd you put this one over that one?"
Yeah, I used there's a couple lines I used in here. I said, on every list there needs to be an outlier, if for no other reason to give hunters something to argue about. And that's my Ohio opener. And then my Wisconsin opener is fact is, any discussion about Wisconsin's deer herd is going to start an argument.
Yes. That sounds like...
It is hard. And like you said, you can look at numbers. I've been looking at numbers for the past week until my eyes bleed, just trying to figure out where to put what state. And then you want a couple sleeper states, too. So let me ask you guys a question. What do you think are the sleeper states for whitetails? Whitetails are states that maybe people don't think about.
All right. Let me see.
Or don't you want to tell me?
Yeah, those are my secrets.
That's why you got to keep it a sleeper.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was going through that list, the states that kind of stuck out to me as sleepers a little bit were actually, to your point, you mentioned a few of those southeastern states really have good age structures because they've been practicing some form of quality deer management or age management a little bit longer than some places. So there's decent age structure, and then I think the western states, like as you start getting to like the Dakotas or Montana and Wyoming, from what I see and hear, I mean, there's a lot of quality opportunities out there. So for me, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. How about you, Dan? Kind of similar thoughts?
Yeah, I would say Dakotas as sleeper states. And that's only from what guys are telling me. Chit-chatting on social media and getting emails from guys, and even, I hate to say it, but I probably would agree with you in Nebraska as well. Some of the what some of the guys are telling me and sharing stories with me. Now the numbers aren't there, but the quality, there's quality there.
Yeah, that's the thing about those. And I agree. I think the western states are probably I don't know if it's a secret, but I think those are sleepers. Montana for sure, Wyoming for sure, and the Dakotas. The Dakotas kind of got hammered with some CWD a couple years ago. But that's the thing about them. People look at them and they go, well, they don't kill that many whitetails. Well, yeah, they don't. But if you look at the whitetails some guys are killing, there's some studs coming out of there.
And the other thing to consider is that in those states, they're not killing that many deer, but that's because there's not that many hunters, compared to how many people, there's 900,000 hunters in Michigan. Well, of course, we're going to kill 400,000 deer. Well, when you look at there's only like 25,000 hunters or whatever it is in North Dakota, well, we're going to have different numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people don't kind of look at the numbers as completely as they should. They just look at one number and go, I don't kill that many deer. Well, okay, but percentage-wise, maybe the percentages are there. So
Now, I actually... this is no joke. I actually had a conversation today with a wildlife biologist in Nebraska, talking about the area that me and Mark might hunt this year, and he was telling me that as far as mule deer are concerned, they had an awesome 2 years in a row now of fawn recruitment, and the average age, he said, of mule deer buck was 3 years old, and then he didn't really say anything about buck doe ratios, but the numbers are definitely going up for mule deer and whitetail as well. So he didn't really tell me anything about the actual age class of harvested whitetails, but it's on the up and up. So that can help support some of that thought as well.
Yeah, and I would agree with them. I mean, I wouldn't have any point to argue with them. I really think there's some really good mule deer hunting to be had here in the next years. And I think, it's funny. We had that bad CWD in 2012 with everyone else had it. That drought year.
You mean EHD?
EHD. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, not thinking right. It's too late in the afternoon. But yeah, EHD in 2012, like most states had, and it was funny. The deer are on the. We had a herd that was too big already, I think, and I think that was probably not a bad thing. I mean, it's a bad thing, obviously, but it did need some herd reduction. But it's amazing the big bucks that have been killed. Last year, I saw more big deer killed, whitetail mule deer, than I've seen in a long time. Not as many people were killing bucks, but the guys that killed bucks killed really, really good bucks here in Nebraska. And I don't know what to attribute that to, other than the fact those are deer that survived that. And then there was less hunter I don't want to say activity the next couple of years, but I think license sales were probably down a bit because people were scared off by the EHD and the deer numbers. So, man, it was a great year last year. I hope that continues in 2016.
Well, it's funny you mention that because that was kind of one of my hypotheses after the big EHD outbreak in 2012 was that 3 years from now or 4 years from now we're going to see some great deer because the deer that survived now are living in a landscape with much less competition for food. So they had great access to nutrition now compared to maybe when they had 4 bucks around them. Now they only had one other buck or one other deer around them. So there's a greater access to food. Some of those deer, the ones that did survive, were probably, I don't know if this is true or not, but maybe they are in some way slightly predispositioned to be healthier deer because they were able to make it through that. So genetics might be, improved as those deer breed. I don't know. I think, like you said, this next year or two and last year, I think hopefully are going to be fruitful years. The silver lining to the cloud that was the 2012 HD.
Yeah, and I don't wonder if maybe with reduced herd numbers, with equals reduced doe numbers, maybe those bigger bucks were moving more, leading to more hunter encounters. They're not as they had to move farther to find does because the does were. I mean, the numbers are really hammered out here, and so maybe that's what it was too. Those bucks have to go farther to find a doe, and there's a better chance of a hunter intercepting them.
That's a great point.
I just threw that. I just made that up just now while we were talking, but it dawned on me.
Well, you should write an article about it and become popular.
I think I'll include that in the article I'm working on.
That's awesome.
Thank you guys for making my job easier.
It's the least we could do, but it really is such a good point, and it's it's something that is so commonly misunderstood, I think, is that so many people think the more does I have, the better my hunting is going to be during the rut. Because you think if I got tons of does, there'll be tons of bucks coming in. But to your point, lots of times having a little bit lower doe population will be better because those bucks have to move around more. There's more competition for fewer does, so they have to be more active. They have to be searching more. They have to be a little bit more aggressive with other bucks. That kind of makes for the more interesting and exciting hunt.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right on that. We get hung up on thinking higher deer numbers are better, and that might not actually be true. So,
yeah. So speaking of that, of the better hunt or where the different types of situations, different areas. Given what you're doing now, I imagine that you've got to deer hunt a lot of different places. Where's your favorite place to deer hunt?
It'll always be at home.
Yeah.
I had access to some really good breaks just south of the North Platte River here near me that was just some phenomenal hunting. And just the type of hunting I like. I would park my truck at the gate and walk all day long and sit and glass, and it was just fun. But, to your point, yeah, I've been to Illinois several times, and I've never killed a deer there. I should say I did kill one deer there, but I've never killed a really great deer there like you're supposed to. So some of those states get overhyped, and I'm so excited about the hunt, and then I go and I'm like, oh man, you got to remember a lot of it's just hype. But Illinois is a great state. Kansas is a great state. I've hunted Missouri several times. I love South Dakota because it's kind of like I'm hunting at home. It's similar territory. I hunted the Pine Ridge Reservation last year and killed probably my best buck. And it was similar hunting to what I do, where you're hunting that open country, and that's kind of what I love.
So, can you tell us about that hunt, that good buck you took last year on the Pine Ridge?
Yeah, and I can tell you about it. I don't know if I want to tell you the true story because I missed 2 other bucks before that. It was a rifle hunt. I was with my friend Neil Davies from Hornady and one of his buddies, Travis Bradford, from the Pine Ridge Reservation up there, and we were hunting. And man, I don't know. I had the yips or something. Golfers get the yips. It was a rifle hunt, but man, I don't know what I did on those other 2 bucks. But then I made a spectacular shot on the buck I killed late in the day. I had 3 days to hunt, but in reality, my girlfriend's birthday was the next day, so I kind of had 1 day to hunt because I did. She was fine with me not being home for her birthday. She said, but you still want to be there. So
that was a trick.
Yes, exactly. I know, and it's a trap, and I think I won it because I actually killed the buck late in the day. I mean, there wasn't much sunlight left at all. We were cruising along a trail road on top of a ridge and spotted a buck. Well, actually spotted a doe first, but she was acting funny, so we thought there was a buck there, and kind of got set up. And sure enough, he came out of this brush pile. I missed him with the first shot, but he was so intent on that doe that I hit him what turned out to be a perfect shot on the second shot. I hit him and he ran. I wasn't real sure that I hit him or hit him good, and so somehow on the run I hit him with a second perfect shot, probably the best shot I've ever made in my life on the third shot, and killed him. So I mean, he was dead after that. We turned to find out the first shot punctured his lungs. Second shot was just not too far off that. So
wow.
So, but yeah, and just I've got to put the tape to him, but he's just a nice buck, beautiful buck. I was with a good friend and a new good friend, Travis Bradford, at the Pine Ridge Reservation. He was such a nice guy, just an enjoyable hunt. And for me, that's a lot of it. I don't tape most of my animals. I've killed 3 beautiful elk in my life. I've never put a tape on any of them. It's experience for me. That's more of it than the inches to me. I mean, it's just I don't mind a guy, and I kind of wish I had my elk tape because people ask me about it, and I'm like, I don't really know, because it'd be nice to have that information. But it's just it was just a really fun hunt with Neil and Travis, and just in hunting the way I enjoy to hunt. I have just the way I was raised. I think I have a hard time sitting in a tree waiting for a deer to come by. I do it every year. I hunt tree stands here in Nebraska too for whitetails down by Paxton, but it's not the funnest way to hunt for me.
It definitely is an acquired taste, I think. I hear from a lot of Western guys who kind of, to your point, they have a hard time with it or they struggle with it. But I guess if you're raised on it, it's all you know. There's a certain something special about sitting there, and the necessity of learning patience has taught us an important virtue, I think. Maybe.
I think and it's funny, as I've gotten older, I like it a lot more. I used to just hate it. I do it just kind of out of necessity, if I wanted to kill some does to the freezer, I'd do it, but I didn't like it. But now that I'm getting older, I enjoy it a lot more. You see so much wildlife when you're sitting in a tree. It's not just about a deer walking by. You'll see coyotes come by and bobcats and the birds, the wildlife. It's really a cool way to hunt. It's just hard for me to slow down and take it all in.
Yeah. It's kind of funny you mentioned that. I was just recently thinking about this. There's some certain types of hobbies or activities that completely engage you 100% so much that you can't think about anything else at all while you're doing it. I was thinking, in this case, it was fly fishing. I was, thinking about this past summer. I've been doing a lot of fly fishing, and you could be there 4 hours. And because you need, at least when I'm fly fishing, I'm thinking about where I'm going to put the cast. I'm thinking about how I'm going to present it. I'm mending the line. I'm thinking, the entire time I'm engaged, 4 hours pass, and I'm like, holy smokes, where'd the time go? So there's something really cool about an activity like that, which I kind of would compare to like Western hunting where you're stalking elk or mule deer or something like that. You're engaged the entire time, and there's something really cool about that. But then there's also something really cool about an activity like deer hunting from a tree stand where you're forced to sit and wait and think and pay attention to all these little details and things that you'd pass by if you were hiking through. But when you have time there just to sit and let things come to you, you have a whole different set of experiences and opportunity to reflect and stuff. So there's something really cool about both of those two different things that I don't know, I kind of like both in their own unique way.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think I've learned more about deer hunting when I'm in a tree stand than when I'm spot and stalking, because you have that time to sit and think and see deer like activity. Like maybe you don't have your stand quite in the right spot, but you see a lot of deer, and you have to figure out in your head, okay, why are they using that spot, and how can I get my tree stand there by tomorrow morning, and stuff like that. I mean, I have learned way more about deer hunting in a stand than I have sitting on a ridge top trying to figure out, why there are no whitetails within my, 5 miles I could see in every direction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think we've all probably been in some kind of situation like that, whether it be on a hill or sitting in the tree looking 30 yards and wondering how come I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
We can all relate to that.
Exactly.
I got a strategy question for you, and the reason I ask is because, like I said, it's purely for me, because there's a chance that we're going out out to Nebraska to hunt this fall. In regards to scouting, let's say you got like 4 or 5 days to hunt, and maybe even less amount of time. How much time is spent in the truck scouting as opposed to scouting outside of the truck, like climbing to a higher vantage point or going in a little deeper?
That kind of depends on the terrain. If you're in the sandhills, I'd say there's a little bit of time spent in the truck, but you're not going to have a lot of opportunity to drive into some of that territory, or you're not going to want to, because you're going to be in prime deer country everywhere you drive. But the beauty is, a lot of the time in those ranches that you're hunting, those animals are more used to trucks than they are guys on feet. So if they see a truck, they're like, oh, that's the rancher. I see that truck all the time, or I see a truck all the time. If it's a human on a foot, they don't see human on foot on their feet very often. And so when they see one, they freak out. So that you kind of have to balance that a little bit with the terrain you're hunting. So I don't know if I could give you a percentage. You just kind of have to play your odds a little bit. But definitely, it's about, especially the sandhills, getting in the highest hill you can find and glassing, and then work your way to the next hill. And because the funny part about those sandhills is they're so choppy in places where you could be within a half a mile of the deer. You can see for 3 miles, but you could be within half a mile of the deer and never know he's there, just because of the land's so choppy. And then you go to the next hill and you bust him out. So you got to be really careful. I'd almost say that a vehicle is typically preferred if you can get in there. If there's a ranch road you can drive on, that sort of stuff. Just because the animals are used to that.
Now, what about like your food to bedding, and with there not being a lot of trees, obviously there's less trees in Nebraska, and in the county that I hunt, there's no running water, there's no creeks. So what kind of I guess terrain features should one be looking for? And this doesn't necessarily have to be in reference to just Nebraska, but in all open land style of hunts, what kind of terrain features should we be looking for, whether it's for movement or for bedding?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The hills are going to be choppy, like I said. One thing I would key on big time, especially if you don't have any running water, is stock tanks. If there's going to be some sort of water. Those animals have to water. I mean, they do get a lot of water from dew, but out here there's not a lot of dew in the mornings. It's dry country. It's arid. We get less than 20 inches of rain a year. Where you're hunting, they probably get 16 to 10 inches of rain a year, if it's where I think it, or where I imagine it is. It's not far from me, and that's about what we get. So there's not a lot of moisture to be had. So I would find, if you can get on Google Maps, or if the rancher or the farmer, or even on public land, because a lot of that land is turned out for grazing, so there's windmills on it. I would key in on those huge. Those are your spots where every deer in the neighborhood is going to go to that spot. Even if they're not thirsty, the bucks are going to go there to see if a doe's been there. It's almost like a signpost, like a scraper or a rub would be. So that's what I would key in on, and then just try to find travel corridors. How they're using it. They're not going to walk over the top of the highest hill. They're going to cut across it. They're going to use saddles. It's kind of like mountain hunting. Use those contours to stay hidden as they move.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I hope that works for you. So.
Gosh, I hope so too. Dan, you need some redemption from last time, right?
Right. I missed an antelope last year, and my first ever, not last year, it was 2 years ago. But you go out there, and I'm Iowan, right? So I'm a tree stand hunter. So you go out there, and all I knew was don't skyline yourself and move, glass, then move. But still, like you said, I was bumping deer out of certain areas, or I would be walking to a point where I didn't think I was skylined, but I kept having to remember there's no trees to block me. So I was skylined from some angle, maybe not the angle that I thought I was.
Yeah, exactly. And they can, like I said, they don't see humans very often outside their vehicles. So when they see someone on foot, man, they freak out and they'll be in the next county quick. Antelope are the same way. So, and one thing I guess I'll touch on, and I don't know how or why you missed, but distances are weird out here. People that hunt heavy cover, heavy timber, get a little freaked out about distance when they're out here. Everything is farther than you think. Or sometimes, it's an optical illusion. I've missed deer or antelope with my bow that I thought were half as close as they were if I didn't have time to range them. So I'll say if you come back out next year to hunt antelope, bring a decoy, because there's nothing better than decoy and antelope.
Right.
Now,
I'm going to buy one.
Have you ever tried the decoy helmet? Have you seen that?
I have not tried the decoy helmet. I've seen it, and I don't know that I'd use it or not. I'll tell you a quick story about my girlfriend's first antelope. She killed one last September with her muzzleloader. And we can use the muzzleloader season in Nebraska for antelope falls right in the peak of the antelope rut. So decoying is phenomenal. I don't use it on land that I know I'm the only one on. Obviously, with a firearm, it's a muzzleloader, but still, you don't want guys shooting at you. But we end of the day, we saw a buck cruising along the hillside, and we skirted around to get to him, in front of him, and he moved a little faster than we thought. And we peeked our head up, and we didn't have an antelope hat on. We just peeked our head up, and he saw us, and he came to 14 yards on a dead sprint. I tried to put the decoy up. It was useless. I threw it behind me and ducked, and basically my girlfriend killed him when he kind of skirted us, went by at 14 yards. He freaked out about as bad as we did, and she killed him at 50 yards.
Wow.
So I don't think you need the decoy helmet. As long as they don't see your whole body, antelope are so curious that they'll come to it. Especially in the rut, especially if they have does and there's been bucks challenging them, little bucks challenging them. Man, there's nothing more exciting. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, whether we do mule deer hunting or antelope hunting or whatever we do, if we get out there, Dan, I'm making you wear a decoy helmet, and you're going to run around on all fours, and I'm going to see if we can get a deer to come running up to you. How about that?
I'll do it.
It's funny. I remember reading I think it was even a Chuck Adams article about hunting Sitka blacktail on Kodiak, and they were wearing some sort of deer hats on there because the deer there get really curious. My problem with that is there's grizzlies on Kodiak.
Yeah, you don't want to decoy that type of critter.
No.
Oh man, yeah, that would make for quite an experience, that's for sure. So Dave, I want to pivot really quick here before we have to let you go, because I want to make sure we talk about wild game cooking. Like you mentioned, you contribute to the Wild Chef blog, right, on the Field and Stream website, and you've done a lot of that kind of writing. So I want to make sure we pick your brain a little bit about that.
Okay.
So I guess first, what is your favorite way to cook venison? Like your go-to, the best way, if you had to pick one.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's really hard to say. I'm gonna tell you, and there's a bandwagon now, but I was doing it before it was cool. I was a hipster. I was doing it before it was cool. Shanks on any deer, elk, antelope, anything are the best cut. I'd almost put them over a backstrap any day of the week, and people will rake me over the coals for it. But the shanks, slow cooked with like some chipotles and some Mexican spices. I'm a huge Southwestern flavors guy. I love Tex-Mex. I love Southwestern food, green chilies. So I'm going to say that, and then wrap it in a tortilla, just almost like make a green chili and then smother burritos with it, or just some shredded up like that. That's my favorite. I don't know. It's not fancy. It's kind of peasant food, but man, do I love just some shredded shanks with some green chili. It's my favorite bar none.
Now, a lot of guys, they don't even save their shanks, though, right? How do you...
No, they throw them out. It drives me crazy.
Right. So for those guys, and I have to admit, I have done that on occasion, and I shouldn't.
I'm going to tell you, I used to do it. I did it for years until I figured out if you just slow cook them, they're delicious.
So how do you go about doing that? A, how should you be, like, butchering it and to save it in the right way, to freeze it up in the right way, and then how do you go about actually, using it?
Okay, so we all know what a shank is. So just cut off that foreleg, cut off the foreleg, and then you'll have the shank will be the next cut. I take a sawzall and cut it off above the knuckle on each end, so I have a bone on a whitetail, probably trying to visualize in my head, 6 to 7 inch bone that's got some meat wrapped around it, and it looks like it's full of tendons and silver skin, and it is, but that's going to cook away. On a deer-sized animal, either whether it be a whitetail or an antelope, or probably even a mule deer, I would actually leave them whole, so it's a whole shank. A lot of guys will cut them into about 2-inch sections with a sawzall or a bone saw. And then, just wrap it and freeze it that way. If you're going to cook it right away, you want to braise it. I mean, there's 2 techniques you need to know as a wild game cook: hot and fast on the grill or in a hot cast iron skillet for steaks. You don't want to overcook that, or slow and low. And that's braising. It's kind of the same thing you're doing in a crock pot. You're cooking in a 250 to 275 degree oven in a covered pot with a little bit of moisture, and that silver skin and those tendons just melt away. And actually it makes it better because it melts into like almost just like a gelatinous thicker sauce. It makes it even better. So that's what you do with your shanks. A lot of guys will cut them off and grind it for jerky. That's fine too. You got to have a good grinder to cut through all that silver skin though. And if you're going to try to do it with a knife, it's a waste of time. It's better just to let that stuff cook away and use that as a flavor.
Yeah, early, I kind of embarrassingly will admit that, I don't know, like 10 years ago or a long time ago when I was trying to deal with one of my own deer by myself for the first time, I remember getting to the shank and I was like, I'm just going to try to like cut out each tiny little sliver that I can without silver skin. So I was in there trying to pull out little tiny pieces between tendons. It was a disaster. So
I'm the same way. I'm a meat miser. I butchered Tessa's antelope last year. And then I took an antelope I killed in Wyoming a couple days later to a butcher, and I got half as much meat from the butcher. And that's not to say all butchers are bad, but, they're doing things quickly. They're not going to take time, man. It takes me so long to butcher my own animals. I do it all myself, but because I want every last ounce of meat on there. And I got tired of, either spending a ton of time on those shanks and then not getting any meat for it, because you cut away one tendon, and then there's another one there, another piece of silver skin. Or throwing them away. I just because man, this is good meat. I can't be wasting it. What do I need to do with it? So I educated myself and learned that hey, you just got to cook them right.
Yeah. So speaking of breaking your animal down and butchering it and all that kind of stuff, given all the different articles you've done on this and the different people I imagine you've talked to, is there any particular common mistakes that you hear that most hunters are making when it comes to that processing part of the process?
I don't know if there's common mistakes. There's so many different ways to do it. My biggest thing is to say just take your time. I mean, I think a lot of guys, they do it themselves and they like the idea of doing it themselves, but they hate the drudgery. So once they start doing it, they just go, I got to get this done. I got football's on, or something's going on, or I got to watch my kids' soccer game. I got to get this done, and they take way too much time. I mean, they do it too quickly. They don't take enough time. So that's my biggest suggestion. Just set aside a day to butcher and do it right.
Yeah, I also recommend several cold beers and maybe a podcast to listen to while you're doing it.
Yeah. Since I discovered podcasting, I will agree with that one, but the cold beers have been in the equation for a long time. Not too many, though, because you have sharp knives that are involved,
yes.
So be careful.
Yes. Be responsible, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm with Dan on that. Responsible.
So what about grilling venison? You did a feature this summer, I'm pretty sure I saw it was you, for Field and Stream, right? That was all about different wild game grilling ideas. Do you have any?
I did a whole grilling package for them.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Some very good looking stuff. Is there anything from that or otherwise that you can share when it comes to grilling venison?
I think what I always say is manage your cuts to the type of cooking you're going to do. So grilling, you're going to want something that's thinner, and you want to cook it hot and fast. So you want your grill super hot, and you want to sear it so that outside gets that crunchy kind of deliciousness. But you got to be careful, especially on venison, because once you overcook venison, it turns into disgusting leather that doesn't taste like very good. It tastes like iron and shoe leather. So you still need it medium rare, no matter what you're cooking. So you want to do hot and fast and manage your fire that way. And you hear it all the time. I talk about grilling, but a 2-zone fire is all I use. I always, no matter if I'm using my gas grill or my charcoal grill, I I always have a cold side. So if something does flare up or something's getting too hot and the other cut's not done yet, I can move it over there. That's my biggest suggestion for grilling. It's, I grew up with my dad grilling, and a flare up was just something you poured beer on. It's just, you had the whole grill and it turned into a big pile of flames. But once you learn about 2-zone or even 3-zone grilling, where you have a hot, a warm, and a cool side, manage your meat that way. Just move it around to where it needs to be. But make sure you get that outside seared. People will say you sear the outside of a steak to hold the juices in. That's not really true. I don't think you'll ever hold the juices into anything unless you vacuum seal it. But you want that kind of crispy, crunchy outside that has all that unctuous flavor on it, and then you still have your moist inside that's just a little bit bloody. At least it is for me.
Yeah. So you talked about this hot and fast versus slow and low. Which cuts are right for either or? Because I feel like some people, I think I know which, but I don't know. Is there some rules that we should follow? Like you always do X with Y?
My hard and fast rule is the farther you get away from the head or hooves of any animal, the more tender the meat. Think about your most tender cut. It's the tenderloin. It's far away from the head and the hooves. Backstraps come next. It's far away. The closer you get, the more those muscles move. And what makes meat tough, or what makes a cut tough, is how much it moves, how much the animal uses it. The neck, it uses its neck tough. So the neck's tough meat. Its legs, it's that's where your front shoulders, that's some tougher meat because they use those a lot. Your shanks close to the hoof, that's your toughest meat. That's toughest meat on any animal. So that's my hard and fast rule. The farther it is away from the hooves or the head, the more tender the cut. And then the more tender the cut, that's the stuff you usually want to cook hot and fast, because you don't need to cook that stuff. It'll cook quickly. You don't overcook it, and it's good. If it's tough, you're going to want to cook it longer at a lower temperature to break those fibers down, so it's not as tough, and you can actually chew it.
That's a good way to remember it. I like the hooves to head reference points. That makes a lot of sense.
That's right. So, you're going to be grilling or you're going to be cooking hot and fast, your backstraps, your tenderloins. There are some cuts, the sirloin, that are, from the hind end that are better. Some of those cuts are a little tougher. You kind of learn that as you butcher your deer. There's the sirloin inside the hind quarter that's delicious. There's a couple steaks you can cut off that front shoulder that you can cook hot and fast. They're going to be a little tougher, but I don't mind my meat. I actually, and this is another thing people rate me really close on, I'm not the biggest tenderloin fan. They're okay, but they don't have a lot of flavor, and to me they're a little too mushy. They're so soft. Especially on a younger deer. As much as I love to kill young deer because all the rest of it's super tender, man, the tenderloins are almost too soft for me. I like to have a little chew to my meat. And so there's a couple steaks off that front shoulder that I'll cut and I'll actually grill.
Speaking of steaks, I feel like I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember reading maybe it was a blog post from you at some point talking about, I don't know, it was like a chimichurri sauce or something like that. It was like a recommended steak topper that lots of people don't use or something like that. I guess first, did you write an article like that?
Yeah. I was lucky enough to go to Argentina earlier this year, and chimichurri is really big in Argentina. But I also had another sauce, and the name escapes me in my head right now, that was really good that I had in Argentina. That's great, and it's just a little red vinegar, some shallots or onions diced up real fine. And maybe some red or green peppers diced up real fine, and a little bit of garlic. It's so good. We had that on our steaks down there. It blew me away. And chimichurri is similar. Chimichurri is usually going to throw some garlic and a lot of parsley in. Chimichurri is usually really, really green sauce from all that parsley. Those are two great steak sauces that aren't really sauces. It's not like an A1. It's not a thick sauce or a ketchup or anything like that. It's more a really fresh, bright flavor that really complements the flavor of the venison really well, or any steak. You can use it on a beef steak too. It's instead of being thick and cloying and sweet like the barbecue or an A1 sauce or a typical steak sauce, it's more bright and fresh and really just complements it well.
Yeah. So to that point then, in addition to those two you just mentioned, I was curious, do you have any other recommended, I don't know if you want to call it a sauce or a topper or a flourish, or I don't know what, garnish to kind of spice up your steak? Because a lot of people, I feel like, throw some salt in their steak and grill it, and after doing that 10 times a summer, they might want to kind of make things a little fresher, a little new for their next meal. Any recommendations for taking your steak to the next level?
For a long time I wasn't a marinade fan because I felt like most marinades people, poured some Italian seasoning in a zip top bag, threw a steak in there, and put it in the refrigerator for 4 days. Thought that they were tenderizing it, and really just ended up with a mushy steak that tasted like a salad. And so I tended to get away from them. But there are a few really light marinades. The key is, for me, and for any marinade, is you really don't need to marinate a steak more than 4 hours, because you're really flavoring it. A marinade doesn't tenderize a steak unless you're using yogurt or an enzyme or pineapple juice. Most stuff that you use, like a vinegar, that's not really tenderizing, it's flavoring. So I'm kind of into some Asian flavors. I love a little soy sauce, a little mirin, just a touch of sesame oil. Sesame oil goes a really long way, but if you put a touch of sesame oil and a little bit of soy sauce, maybe some sesame seeds, coriander, and throw that in a quick marinade, oh man, that's kind of my favorite right now.
That does sound very good. I'm getting pretty hungry.
And it's funny. I go in stages where, like, I'll get on an Asian kick for a long time. So, for a month I'll eat all my steaks and I'll make up an Asian. So I'm just, I don't have any hard and fast rules when I make a marinade. It's usually like, oh man, I'm hungry. What am I going to throw in a bowl, whisk together? So I'll do some Asian flavors, and then I'll be like, oh no, I like Tex-Mex, and so then I'll eat some Tex-Mex for a month or two, and then I'll get sick of that. So it's funny. I just kind of go in stages, kind of go around the world, I guess. But you said that a lot of guys just do a salt on their steak and call it good. Man, for a backstrap, kosher salt and black pepper, that's about all there is to do it. I'll throw a plug in, and it's not really a plug, but I believe that I've been using it for like 15 years. There's a seasoning that's Nebraska local called Baldridge's Seasoning, and it's made by a little family in North Platte, and it is by far the best wild game seasoning I have ever tried. I kind of know the family, but it's not like I'm doing them any favors. I just believe in it. So if you're ever in Nebraska, you'll be near North Platte or Ogallala, go in the grocery store. I'll almost promise they have some Baldridge seasoning there. Everybody has their favorite. There's Montreal's, there's Johnny's. It's like that, but for some reason, I wish I knew what they put in it because I'd make it myself, but I just buy a big jar of Baldridge's whenever I'm in the grocery store, and I go through it a ton. And I've turned people onto it all over the place. So,
man,
all right. That's my one plug for the day. Sorry for jumping in and offending if you have any seasoning advertisers. So.
we do not. You're fine. Me and Dan will make sure to keep an eye out for that if we're able to make it up.
I was in no way compensated for that. I actually just love it. So
that's awesome. So
how about you guys? Any marinades or seasonings I should know about or try? I mean, that's one thing I like about when I travel to hunt. I always learn either new techniques or new flavorings. And so let me pick your brain real quick. How about you guys?
Oh, geez, you're asking the wrong guys, I think. I don't know. Dan?
I do olive oil and garlic. That's kind of like a marinade that I've used over the years and you're right, with a little bit of soy sauce, and let it set for an hour or two before I throw it on a grill. And that's what I've used in the past for grilling. When I do my when I do my low and slow in the crock pot, that's more of chopped garlic and some salt and pepper. I throw some lemon pepper on there as well.
Yeah, lemon pepper is really good. And it's funny, it's funny how the two techniques, and I don't know why this is, the hot and fast grilling, you kind of go with fresher, brighter flavors, but for some reason when we think crock pot or braising or any of that slow cooking, we want these rich, deep flavors. I don't know if it's because we're doing that in the winter and we want to be warm, we want the Hungarian goulash and stuff like that, so we want big, thick, flavorful stuff, and in the summer we're hot and we just want something to chase our beer with. But it's funny how your tongue kind of travels through these different flavor paths throughout the year.
It is. It's kind of funny you mentioned that. We do some kind of similar things. I don't do a lot of like marinades for our steak. Usually what I end up doing is I'll just do olive oil and salt on the steak, grill it up, but then we might put some kind of like topper or sauce on it or on the side or something. So we sometimes make like an herb butter. Like my wife will mix up a bunch of herbs with some whipped butter, and then we might just put a little dollop of that on top of a steak. We also will put sometimes, my wife does this more than I do, she'll sometimes just pour like balsamic vinaigrette on her steak. And then something that I really like that is, kind of a commonly held, or it's a popular use is some type of berry sauce on your venison. So just the other day, I grilled up some steaks and we made a sauce. Well, first we sauteed some shiitake mushrooms, some great big shiitake mushrooms sliced up. And then we made a sauce out of blackberries, fresh blackberries, a dark red wine, and some butter and onions. And got that all mixed up and hot together and put that on top of the mushrooms on the steak, and that was just dynamite.
Oh yeah, and this time of year, we're starting to get some fresh berries coming off everywhere. Especially if you're in Montana, you should be able to find some fresh blueberries here pretty quick. And it's hard to beat some fresh blueberry pan sauce on a steak. So, man, that's just a great thing.
Yeah.
So. But you made a point there that I want to bring up. You said you mix some herbs with butter. That's something that's very simple to do. It's called a compound butter, and you can put about any flavorings you want in it. That's a great thing. I've been doing cilantro, lime juice, and butter, and actually putting it on our fresh grilled sweet corn, and it's just to die for. And the thing is, you can make that compound butter ahead of time and stick it in the freezer, and then just cut off a little bit of it and put it on top of your steak. I mean, that's the secret to most great steakhouses in the world. Is before they bring their steak out to you, they put a big old hunk of butter on it and melt it into it as they bring it to your table. So, it's called a compound butter, and make any combination of herbs or flavoring you want, whip that into some butter and freeze it, and then you'll always have a great steak topping any time of year. So.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. The idea of making it ahead of time and saving it for future uses, that's the way to go. So I'll tell you one thing, David, you have most definitely made me hungry and antsy to get out of the studio and get to dinner. So,
well, that's good. I hope you're having a fresh trout dinner or something. I don't know what my dinner plans for tonight are yet. We'll see. There's probably some leftovers in there. I like to think that I'm this well-known wild game cook, but a lot of time it's cheese wrapped in a tortilla because I'm in a hurry to do something.
The truth comes out. So David,
that is true.
So before we let you go, really quick, David, if anyone wants to see your work, to read some of your articles, where should they go? Where should they look to find that stuff?
Yeah, so on fieldandstream.com, there's a blog called The Wild Chef. That's 90% written by me, so you'll find my stuff there. I write the fair game column every month in Peterson's Hunting Magazine, and that's also all cooking related. If you just want general hunting stuff, Field and Stream, the print magazine, almost always has something in the buy at Peterson's Hunting. Wildfowl, I'm a big waterfowler, so I love contributing to wildfowl. And, I'd love for them to follow me on Instagram. It's Feral Fork is my Instagram, Feral Fork, Fork. And, that's just kind of I call that my facade. That's my curated life. That's all the cool stuff I do. You don't have to see me sitting at my computer 10 hours a day writing words out. Just see every once in a while I catch a nice bluegill or I kill a nice animal and I get it on there. So follow me there, or check me out on fieldstream.com, and I'd love to have people chime in whenever they want. So.
Awesome. Well, I will recommend everyone listening to follow you on Instagram if and only if you will post a picture of you eating a tortilla with cheese.
I will do that. I might have to fancy it up with some salsa or something, so it's not too proletarian. But I will definitely do that.
All right. Perfect. All right. Well,
cool.
David,
hey man, I really appreciate it. I was excited when you asked me to come on. I'm a big fan of Wired to Hunt and a big fan of everything you guys do, and so I'm really excited to be on here. I'm glad I got to join you guys and talk about something that truthfully I don't do enough, and that's whitetail hunt. I get out for mule deer and elk and ducks and geese, and I try to get out a few days every year for whitetail, but I always like talking about it. So
well, we appreciate it too. This has been a blast. We got some good laughs, some good info, and hungry stomachs. So David, you're welcome back anytime.
Great. Thanks, guys, and Dan, good luck in Nebraska. So it's my favorite state. It's been my home my whole life. So I'm glad you're going to come out here and do it. But as I told you before, there are no deer here. So move along, please.
All right, David. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon. And with that, we will wrap this one up. So before we go, we do need to take a quick second to thank our partners who help keep this podcast going. So big thank you to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Maven Optics, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. Thank you. And finally, thank you all for joining us today and tuning in. Hopefully you enjoy this conversation with David and our talks about the Great Plains and cooking venison and even the butterfly effect. You never quite know where we're going to go with these things, but hopefully you stuck around and enjoyed what we had to say. So until next time, thanks again, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.